Facebook, you missed a lot of great Cardinal talk. I'm very sorry. But if you give me a phone call, I'll be glad to repeat it all for you. Denise, just so you know, they started it. I came in, did not mention the Cardinals at all, and then they just asked me questions, and I did my pastorly duty and answered them. So, in great detail, probably. But anyway, go Cardinals. And I can't say anything more because some of you may be taping it as we speak, like I am. They got another game to go tonight. So, hello, and that's probably a good reminder. If you guys here can stay with me a second, I like to pull up Facebook so I can interact with everyone. And Tammy Bleckler is on live. Hello, Tammy. Donna Gibson is on live. Tammy, let us know how you are doing. If you can let us know in the comments. And I know Tammy had her surgery on Monday. It's her usual kind of checkup surgeries that she has every 60 days. So, Tammy, we hope you're doing okay. It's good to see you on here. I'm sure others will be kind of growing with us. And we'll be mentioning some prayer requests and things as we go. How's everybody doing tonight? Doing good. We're getting some nice weather, and everything's kind of falling in place. We have 9 days of school left, counting the 2 half days. The junior hires make me count. They come in, they say, change the number, Mr. Ingram. That's the first thing we do every day. We kind of remove one day down, and so tomorrow we'll change it to 8. And so everybody, it's going pretty well. Hey, I'm excited to start a new series with you guys called Bridge Stories. It's based on a book that's a little bit dated now, but still excellent and has good principles. It's called The Church of Irresistible Influence, and it's building a bridge from the church to the community. And I've not met Robert Lewis. I'm not even sure he's still the pastor there now. He might have retired. I think it's Fellowship. They're a Fellowship Bible Church. It's in Arkansas. I've been there. I've visited that church. It's been probably 18 years ago since I've been there. That's about how old this book is. Really neat church. They do some really neat things. I've never met Pastor Lewis. If you're really intrigued by this book, I have an extra copy that came to my mailbox yesterday because as I thought about this book, I didn't see it on my shelf. And then I thought, well, I better order another one. And then sure enough, I came back the next day, and there it was right in front of me. So I don't know. So I've got my old copy with my liner notes here that I've made 18, 20 years ago. And I've got a new one just in the mail for you. If you want to borrow it, if you want to own it, if you're intrigued by some of the things I read, I'm more than happy. Or maybe we can just put it out in the church library here, and people can check it out. But I do have an extra one that arrived at my news box the other day. So it has a lot of stories about building bridges. And my favorite story is the story of Mr. Eads, James Buchanan Eads. Have you ever heard of the Eads Bridge? Okay, well, I'll give Mr. Lewis all the credit where credit is due. He researched and wrote this story. I'll just read it to you along with several other insights that he has. He says, for the job of bridging the Mississippi River, the resume of James Buchanan Eads did not naturally surface. Engineering degree, none. Bridges built, none. Work experience, underwater salvage, a glass factory, which was eventually closed down, a gadabout, a gunboat builder, and a river boatman. Yet shortly after the Civil War, when the City Council of St. Louis declared it indispensably necessary to erect a bridge across the Mississippi River, Eads was chosen for the job. More renowned and distinguished candidates such as Charles Ellett and James Roebling. Roebling had constructed suspension bridges across the Niagara River Gorge, they were turned down. Slim, leathery, given to strong opinions, often disliked, Eads had at least two things going for him: unbridled self-confidence and an unmatched knowledge of the river itself. Wrote one writer, he managed to convince men who had worked with the country's foremost engineers that he, James B. Eads, was the one man fit to bridge the Mississippi at St. Louis, and that the bridge that he wanted to build was the only answer. The city was gambling its entire future on a novice. At the time, 5 railroads from the east and 3 from the west converged on St. Louis. The only way for the trains to cross was via a barge, one railroad car at a time. By bridging the Mississippi, St. Louis would be a national artery and would secure a lifeblood of new commerce. Roebling, the famous engineer, for one, was dumbfounded by the city's risk. Considered to be perhaps the country's greatest engineer, Roebling had not just one, but 2 sets of plans turned down by St. Louis. Miffed and confused by the city's choice of Eads, Roebling would later write to his son that, quote, St. Louis people are fools, unquote. The bridge proposal of Eads, like the man himself, was indeed radical, unorthodox, and untested. Instead of suspension or iron truss design, which was customary for railroad bridges at the time, Eads proposed an arched bridge that would cross the river in just 3 mammoth spans, the largest of which would exceed a record distance by more than 100 feet. The arches would rest on massive stone piers and would gain their needed strength from 2 untested ideas, at least in terms of bridge building, one old and the other new. The cantilever or cantilever principle was originally articulated by Galileo in the 17th century in the use of steel. He would build the bridge with little disruption to boatmen, for whom he had great empathy. And for all that, said his critics, he might as well sprout wings from his back and fly across the river himself. One consultant to Eads, Jacob H. Linville, the bridge engineer for the Pennsylvania Railroad, and an undisputed authority, did not believe Eads' ideas would work. He wrote, quote, I cannot consent to imperil my reputation by appearing to encourage or approve of its adoption, unquote. He added that he deemed such a bridge as, quote, entirely unsafe and impracticable. After beginning construction, the running joke in neighboring saloons soon became the bridge that would take $7 million to build and 7 million years. But Eads had a history of prevailing. He had gone to poverty to wealth, to poverty and back to wealth. He could play chess with 3 men at once and win each game. In a weightlifting contest with blacksmiths, the wiry Eads placed second with plans for a rematch. He possessed a far greater power, a knowledge of the great river itself, which since his birth he had been in, around, under, and over. At deep and shallow levels, he understood the river. And with the wisdom of the river in his mind and body, he knew, like no one else would, what it would take to bridge it. In response to his critics, Eads coolly responded, quote, must we admit that because a thing never has been done, it never can be, when our knowledge and judgment assure us that is entirely practicable. Proof he knew would come. And as I read a little bit more about George Eads, he was a salvageman, and a lot of people wouldn't know how to find like sunken treasure on the Mississippi. Eads figured out how to build diving bells out of barrels. And he would get them to go under and collect stuff and come back up. He knew the river. He knew what it would take. And he was able to kind of get muddy in the muddy Mississippi to build the pillars there. And I guess, I haven't been there lately because we haven't been there since the pandemic. You can still drive by them today, can't you? The big brick pillars that he's placed there. And I think within the recent things that they've done, probably as old as this book, about 18 years ago, you can drive over that bridge now several times, going back and forth. They've reopened it. And the key, Lewis says, is how do we begin to build the bridge from our church to the outside world? And he says a lot of times the gap that comes between the church and our outside world is kind of how we approach things. And it's not sensing a cultural difference that's happened in our world. And it's probably been happening for the last 20 years. The key for George Eads to build a successful bridge is he knew the Mississippi River better than any engineer ever could. And the key for building a bridge in this day and age is knowing our culture and what it's like. See, a lot of times we think that our number one job as Christians is we have a truth about the gospel that we have to teach, preach, proclaim, and make known to the people out there. And maybe this cultural shift has been around as long as the Bible itself. Do you remember Jesus being arrested? And do you remember him going to a man named Pilate? And if you want to turn with me in your Bibles, in John chapter 18, I believe, we see a very interesting exchange. And I'm just going to read from verse 37 and 38. Pilate pulls Jesus aside to interview him. Pilate has the power to free Jesus from all the shenanigans and uproars of the Jewish Pharisees, right? And Pilate very much wants Jesus to know that he has the power to free him. Don't you know who I am, right? That's kind of the meaning of the conversation. And Pilate says in verse 37, "So, you are a king." And Jesus responded, "You say I am a king, but actually I was born and came into this world to testify to the truth. All who love the truth recognize that what I say is true." And with one Roman scoff, Pilate blows the whole thing off by saying what? What is truth? What is truth? And I think it's very similar to the culture that we live in today. And churches are very much wanting to proclaim the truth we have to a culture that really doesn't understand what truth even is. And in the last 18 to 20 years, we'll almost be revolted by something that claims to be absolutely true. Because, it may be true for you, but be careful now, because it may not be true for me. Isn't that the way the world works? And that's the gap. We want to proclaim the truth to a world that ever since Pilate, but especially more so in the last 20 years, doesn't really like dealing with truth or believe in truth or want to see truth. And so here's what Lewis says about that. It says, to our age, truth is nothing more than talk, especially when you don't show it. The eye, not the ear, is the decisive organ. Our postmodern world is tired of words. It wants real. Real is everything. Real is convincing. And yet real is something the church seems less and less geared to demonstrating, much less producing. Lewis's words here, not mine. We are geared to its slicker, more technologically brilliant presentations of truth. But the real truth is, where is the love of God we talk about? Where is the transforming power of Christ? The changed lives, the selfless giving, the good works. Here's the dagger from Lewis. While the world waits to see it in their communities, the church is consumed with talking about it in their sanctuaries. Isn't that a powerful sentence? Lewis. Yeah, we love to talk about the truth, discuss the truth, but the world wants to see the truth. The world wants proof, okay? Why do you think the world is geared that way? Why do we live in I'll believe it when I see it kind of world? Okay, it's not a trusting world, okay? Who said that? Carol, there's so many lies. True or false? That's got, yeah. True or false? All these lies claim to be true. Yeah. You know, people are bombarded with so-called truths every day for $19.99 plus shipping and handling. You too can have all your problems solved. Just dial this number, run your credit card, right? You got this religion, you got that religion, you got this belief, you got this advice, you got this infomercial, you got this podcast, you've got this talk show host, you got that newscaster. I mean, people are just bombarded with everything they claim to be as true. And to them, to us, we know that Jesus is the truth. He's the way, He's the truth, He's the life. But to the world, they're kind of like Pilate. So, everybody says everything is the truth. Why would what you have to say be any different? And there's the bridge. And Eve says, you got to know where you're dealing with. Kind of get in the muddy, and I'll show you. You just wait. I'll show you the proof. And Lewis says, a great definition of the church is people that are willing to come together, worship Christ, and yet live out the truth as living proof to their community. Okay? And there's a lot of Bible verses, I think, that go along with this. Turn to Galatians 6. Galatians chapter 6. Verse 9 and 10. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 and 10. Paul kind of talks about this very thing, the very last chapter of Galatians. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 and 10. Paul says, let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially to those in the family of faith. Let's not be tired of living out, doing good things, serving, giving, showing up, encouraging, providing, whatever it takes, because the world will know we are Christians by how we love one another. They need to see it to believe it. Is that for real? You say you've got the truth. Prove it. Paul says, great, prove it. Don't get tired of doing what is good. Here's a fun one Paul says from Romans. Romans 12, 21 and 22. If I was smart, I'd start with Romans first, huh? Keep us going in kind of the right direction. Romans 12, check my note. 20 and 21, excuse me. Okay. Let's start with 19. I'm going to go back to 19. Romans 12, 19, 20, 21. Dear friends, never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God. For the scriptures say, I will take revenge. I will pay them back, says the Lord. Do you ever have anybody you wanted to get even with? Did you ever have anybody that deserved something that was coming from you? Paul says, don't do that. We're pointing fingers. I'm not watching. Instead, here we go. If your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals of shame on their heads. Right? I can't believe these people are being nice to me after I was being. Don't let evil conquer you. But you conquer evil. How? By doing good. Okay, that's all right. That's the app Denise uses. I can hear it. I've heard that voice before. Yeah, don't let evil conquer you, but you conquer evil. How? By doing good things, loving your enemies, doing good to those who hate us. You're okay. You want me to see it? Is it an iPhone? This may be something better than what I'm saying. I don't know. There you go. Closing all your windows there. Well, you got a lot open there. I'm still going. Okay, there you go. I'll let you keep going. Whew, Marty's on that phone. Hope I didn't close too much there. All right. So, yeah, Denise has that same app. I don't know how you do that. You press a little button, and the Bible teacher comes on. Yeah. Jesus always said, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. If you are just showing proof to the people that already know Jesus is real, anybody can do that. If you're just good to people who like you, he says, how is that? He said, even the pagans do that. He said, anybody can be good to those who are, but my followers, right, will be good to everyone. They'll be eager to show proof. They'll be eager to do things. Hey, quickly, how can churches offer proof to the world of the truth that we have of the gospel? Okay. What did you say, Bruce? Open up God's Word. Okay. How do we show that to the world? By the way we live. Living differently, okay? Ooh. That's a scary verse. And I will look at me and say, away from me, evildoers, right? Because when I was hungry, you did not feed me. When I was thirsty, you did not give me a drink. And, you guys come on in. What did we do? Because when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. When I was naked, you gave me clothes. Wouldn't we do that, God? And what was his answer? When you helped out those in your community who were the least, you didn't know it, but you were helping me. That's probably as eye-opening today as it was a couple thousand years ago, right? Yeah. So what are ways we can do that? Taking food to people that are hungry. Okay. Giving to the cooperative program as they take the gospel all around the world. Okay. Okay. Disaster relief. Yeah. Checking in your own community. And I think the book made an interesting point. What Eads was doing to the Mississippi River probably wouldn't work in the Ohio River or the Niagara Gorge where Roebling built his famous suspension bridge. Every area kind of needs a unique bridge based on what the needs are and the geography is. And isn't that true? A lot of times we'll see another church do something, and our first response is, we got to do that. Well, that may have worked perfectly in Mississippi because Mississippi's culture is a lot, or it may have worked perfectly in California. But California, and the things that Lewis was doing in Arkansas, we had to kind of be careful because it's like, well, Arkansas is a whole different planet than Illinois. And what I did in Springfield or Havana may be a whole different ball game than the culture of, that's something I've got to keep learning. This is a whole new community with whole different needs, whole different people. And when we find out what the needs are, how can we meet them? I mean, George Eads was great because he'd been down that river. He'd sailed across that river. He knew the river better than anybody else, and that's why St. Louis, I guess, thank goodness, right, chose him. Because his bridge is still standing and effective today. So we kind of, and really, it's amazing when the church says, how can we serve the community? The church perseveres in fascinating ways. I've often told you this type of story, but I want to read it to you. You know, a lot of people are astounded by how the early church grew. If you really get into numbers, the early church grew at an astounding 40% growth rate per decade. This is in the middle of like the Roman Empire that was wanting to kill them. Right? I mean, they faced adversity more than we can imagine. Yet it grew. And here's a little historian. There's a gentleman by the name of Rodney Stark. Again, I'll thank Lewis for doing this research for me. But Rodney Stark wrote a book called The Rise of Christianity. He said that he noticed the extraordinary expansion of Christianity in the 1st and 2nd centuries. Stark was puzzled at how a marginalized, persecuted, and for their culture, let's face it, they were often uneducated. How does this persecuted, uneducated, out there group of people not only able to survive all of this, but thrive? He concludes that a key reason was their willingness to sacrifice themselves out of love for each other and for the world. The sacrifice released an explosion of light and heat the world had ever known. Take, for example, the 2 great plagues that swept the Roman Empire in the years AD 165 and 251. It killed 1/3 of the population each time. The willingness of Christians, this is quoting from Stark, to care for others was put on dramatic public display. Pagans tried to avoid all contact with the afflicted, often casting the still living into the gutters. Christians, on the other hand, nursed the sick, even though some died doing so. Christians also were visible and valuable during the frequent natural and social disasters afflicting the Greco-Roman world. Earthquakes, famines, floods, riots, civil wars, invasions. Even in healthier times, the pagan emperor Julian noted that followers of the way support not only their poor, but ours as well. Never had the world seen such a dispensation of alms as was now organized by the church. The church helped widows, orphans, the sick, infirmaries, prisons, victims of natural catastrophes, and the church frequently intervened to protect the lower orders from unusual exploitation or excessive taxation. In many cases, priests gave all their property to the poor. Others devoted fortunes to charitable work. The church or her rich laymen founded public hospitals on a scale never known before. In italics, pagans admired the steadfastness of Christians in caring for sick in cities stricken with famine or pestilence. You couldn't help but notice how the early church was able to get a little dirty, set the foundations of love and love in action. They didn't just say, we have the truth. They lived the truth. And oftentimes put their lives on the line to show it. And even people like the Roman governor who couldn't stand them had to admit, there's something different about this group of people. So Lewis says, oh, and by the way, A well-designed and flawlessly constructed bridge is a collective work of art, okay? And nowhere was this more true than the bridging of the Mississippi in 1874. With fanfare and fireworks, the bridge anchored securely against the raging currents of the great river and was officially opened on July 4th. Praise was everywhere. Louis Sullivan, a famous architect, called it sensational and tectonic. Walt Whitman, the poet, extolled the perfection and beauty unsurpassable of its structure. Under a 50-foot poster of Eads hanging from the bridge was an understated plaque that read, "The Mississippi, discovered by Marquette, 1673, but spanned by Captain Eads in 1874. And Lewis said, in my quest to discern how my pastoral ministry could be more effective, I saw that more preaching is not the answer to today's spiritual hunger. Neither is the writing of more books, the hosting of more conferences, better technology, or special effects. For the most part, we were simply just talking to ourselves. Meanwhile, the church grew increasingly isolated from its community and the culture, glorifying in a biblical witness it often did not really possess. Then I looked at some of the early attempts by our church serving and caring for our community. I noticed the changed lives that resulted from members investing their lives in helping families in a low-income area known as the East Gate. I observed the impact of doctors from our church who set up a medical clinic at a home for unwedded mothers. I felt a sense of God's pleasure as I joined hundreds of our members as we went into the community one Saturday to clean up neighborhoods, repair homes, and complete other projects. I noted that city leaders were beginning to view our church as a force of good in the community. And wonderfully, I saw people who were formerly hardened to and skeptical of the gospel soften and embrace Christ. I realized we don't need to be slicker or trendier to draw people to Christ, just holier. We didn't need to invest time and money into more events, but reinvesting it into equipping our people to live genuinely good lives. We didn't need to be more religious. We just needed to be more connected. And I told my church, let's put much less time into pointing out the world's faults and much more time into providing God's love. Those are some interesting words there, isn't it? Some pretty bold words. And but for the church, it's time to say, if our Christianity is real, let's live it. For the world, this emptiness is from a lack of captivating, life-giving proof. The world says, if your Christianity is real, let's see it. Isn't that interesting? Proof sometimes builds the bridge. And I know that's why I was kind of taking the dagger out of my heart. Because a lot of times, I'm a teacher at heart, right? So I'm all ready to preach another sermon or give another truth. But I got to remember, to the world that doesn't know Jesus, it's just another thing that's out there. And what can we do to show it, so people can see it as well as believe it? And that's what Eads says would build the bridge. What are some ways that you have built a bridge to your community and shown God's love? And I'm still the rookie here. I know for a fact this church has done things to show God's love to the community. What are some things you've done or seen our church do? Okay. A community fest, what the church has done before.
I think they've done something like that here once, didn't they, Laura? Just 4 years ago, like a community fest of some sort. And I can't understand. Okay. And I think, Rick, did we do something like that here once?
Right. And we do the trunk or treat.
Trunk or treats, absolutely. Just we got to give a big round of applause to Trenda and her kids team. And just not that long ago with our Easter egg hunt. That was a great way. We had people from the community that were, especially during the pandemic, wanted to see something. So I don't give this message to say, ugh, we've done some good things. It's just, hopefully it gets us to thinking, how can we do that all the more? And it really, it's just in our own personal lives. I read an evangelism book one time that said, you want to share Christ with somebody? He said, do you know how to bake a cherry pie? I don't. So I thought, oh, I'm in trouble. And that's just, it was kind of the same principle. You can go and tell people all sorts of things. But if you do something nice for them that you know how to do, that's within your skill set. He says a lot of people, they go, oh man, I don't know if I can share the gospel. I don't know if I could say all these facts, and what if I mess it up, and what if I get it in the wrong order? And he says, just go over to somebody's house and say, hey, I made a cherry pie for you. And it just, wow, I just wanted to do, it's just show you that something like that has more impact than what you know. And he had a great saying in that book, and my buddy who does college ministry at the BSU in Kirksville tells his students this over and over again. He goes, here's what you do. You love people until they ask you why. Love them till they ask you why. Why did you bake me? Why did you bake me? Why are you baking me a cherry pie every week? Because, man, I love you, and Jesus loves me, and I just want to show what he means to the world. Oh. And really, if you think about it, in our communities, in our neighborhood, in our family, God, what are the needs in my family? We all have people that don't know Christ in our families. What do they need? Maybe they need encouragement. Maybe they need a cherry pie. maybe, and I just want to show them God's love, and God, just open up that door till they ask me why I do it for them, and then I can tell them, because God loves me and he loves you too. And don't you ever forget it. Yeah.
One of the things that this other church did that I thought was just great, some people didn't agree with it, but we got the businesses in the community involved in that.
Okay.
By allowing them to, they could do whatever they wanted in and made a plaque with their name. This ride was donated by, and I mean, it was
So we got businesses to kind of sponsor it. So what Margie said is one thing she saw another church do is as they were doing nice things, they got businesses to kind of help sponsor them. So the businesses kind of got their name on it, and they just kind of got in on the fun. And I really, and again, it's that changing culture. A very good friend of mine, he passed away before I moved here, was the chaplain at Washington Street Mission. They hosted things for the homeless. And every once in a while, they wanted a church to come and fix breakfast for the homeless. So our hospitality said, our church will do it. I'm like, we will? She's like, yes, okay. And so she planned it together. She had a team. She'd buy the food. The church would buy the food. They just needed a team to go over and fix breakfast. And we had a great time, and everybody said, oh, man, it was really powerful. We served them breakfast, and you got to go out and pour coffee and interact with the people. Sadly, I don't think it's a ministry they do anymore. They might. I don't know. But our church did it every month, and word got to grow. And as a pastor, I would always go when I can, and it was really weird. I'd start looking around, and it'd be like, who's that? Oh, that's my friend. He's like, I can't ever get him to come to church, but when I told him we were going to help the homeless, he wanted to know if he could come. And I'm like, great! So we began to find that as we really kind of did these service things, it really, people that never wanted to set foot in a church suddenly wanted to be a part of the church. Yeah, Trenda. Okay. Yeah. Oh my goodness. To help a family who's yeah. Wow. Yeah. And that's just a gift that Josh had, and he used it. What a powerful story. I don't know. I hope I'll tell it right now. But for those of you online, it was Pedro's sister. Her husband was in this accident. Did I hear that correctly? Oh, my goodness. And he lost his life, and their family was here, and Josh took their picture. And when we found out that her husband had passed away, the church gave money, the church took food, and Josh had a beautiful last picture that they'd taken together. And just a lot of ways, the church saying, hey, here is God's love for real. And that's the thing. You don't have to invent something big, grand, new. Oh my gosh, Pastor Ed says we got to do what this. See, that's what our brain automatically starts doing is we think of all these big churches and what they did. And I don't know, can we do that? Can we handle that? Can we do that? Well, George East didn't do that. As a matter of fact, George East did the exact opposite. He says, I'm not going to do what all those big engineers did. I'm going to do what I know how to do. And it still turned this whole city upside down if you think about it. Absolutely. It was more than just that one family that it ministered to. It was the whole community. Yeah. And so that's all I've got to share tonight. It was fun kind of rereading that book again. And again, you don't have to wait for Pastor Ed to come up with an idea. You may think, hey, I've got a great idea for my community. You don't even have to wait for our church to come up with an idea. Maybe you just say, hey, here's what I can do for my street. Here's what I can do. You don't have to do it for your whole street. Here's what I can do for my next door neighbor. Here's what I can do for my grandkids. Here's what I can do for my grandson. Here's what I can do for my kids. Just what's a way we can show them, here's what God's love looks like. And because that's what the 1999 plus shipping and handling world doesn't do. Right? In reality, there's a lot of things in the world that want to take something from people, whether it's their money, time, allegiance. The church says, no, we just have something we want to give you. Free of charge, free. We don't need anything in return. We just want to show God's love to you. And that's what Jesus did for us. And you look back across history, when the church did that, nothing could stop it. Isn't that fun? So just something to kind of think about tonight. That's all I have tonight. What time is it? I lost my phone. I'm trying to... Okay, it's a long time. We stop then. I'm going to get choir ready to go. Thank you for those of you online. I'll check here and see if we've got a lot of people watching. Not a lot of prayer requests. So I don't know if we lost Tammy or not. She didn't leave a message. Tammy, if you're out there, we're going to pray for you tonight, okay? So, all right.